Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So, if you can please have everyone sit down. Once again, Assalamu alaikum. My name is Abu Dhar. I'm the Vice President of MSA for those of you who don't know. Inshallah, before we get the program started, I'd like to invite Brother Zakaria Tahawi to come recite Quran for us.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وأنا منا المسلمون ومنا القاسطون فمن أسلم فأولئك تحروا رشدا وأما القاسطون فكانوا لجهنم حطبا وأن لو استقاموا على الطريقة لأسقيناهم ماء غدقا لنفتنهم فيه ومن يعرض عن ذكر ربه يسلكه عذابا صعدا وأن المساجد لله فلا تدعوا مع الله أحدا وأنه لما قام عبد الله يدعوه كادوا يكونون عليه لبدا قل إنما أدعو ربي ولا أشرك به أحدا قل إني لا أملك لكم ضرا ولا رشدا قل إني لن يجيرني من الله أحد ولن أجد من دونه ملتحدا إلا بلاغا من الله ورسالاته ومن يعص الله ورسوله فإن له نار جهنم خالدين فيها أبدا حتى إذا رأوا ما يوعدون فسيعلمون من أضعف ناصرا وأقل عددا قل إن أدري أقريب ما توعدون أم يجعل له ربي أمدا عالم الغيب فلا يظهر على غيبه أحدا إلا من ارتضى من رسول فإنه يسلك من بين يديه ومن خلفه رصدا ليعلم أن قد أبلغوا رسالات ربهم وأحاط بما لديهم وأحصى كل شيء عددا صدق الله العظيم. بارك الله فيكم.
تكبير الله أكبر تكبير الله أكبر تكبير الله أكبر.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Jazakallah khair, Hafiz Zakaria, for the Quran recitation. May Allah reward you and your family for all the time and effort you put in. Ameen. Jazakallah khair, everyone, for joining us today. And mashallah, I see a lot of new faces here tonight. And I know for some of us, it's our first time at an MSA event. And so for those of you who don't know me, I'm Fahad. I'm the program chair lead here at the Muslim Student Association. And here at the MSA, we do a lot of different events that cater to the Muslim population here on campus. We do events such as social events, all the way to educational events like these ones. And so if that's something that piques your interest and you're a student that goes here on campus, I believe we handed out postcards right when you walked in. On those postcards, there's WhatsApp group chat links that you can join. There's Instagram links that you can follow. That way, inshallah, you can stay up to date with all the different events that we have. The title for tonight's topic is Preserving Your Islamic Identity in the West. And now, as a board, when we were coming up with different topics to present to you guys, we realized that there was a lack of identity, lack of self-confidence that people have when practicing here. And that may be due to Western influences, due to cultural pressure, or even we might be afraid what people might think of us. And so this at times hinders us from being the best Muslim that we can be, being the best worshiper that we can be. So my dear brothers and sisters, what we want to leave you here with tonight is by knowing and realizing the different ways that you can preserve your Islamic identity in the West, you and yourself will unlock levels of iman, levels of faith that you didn't even know that you could reach. And inshallah, take those steps to be the best Muslim that you can be. Tonight's talk is given by none other than Sheikh Dr. Yasir Qadhi. And as many of you know him because of how pivotal he's been in receiving Islamic education in the West. But for those of you who don't know him, I'll be giving you a short summary of Dr. Yasir. Dr. Yasir Qadhi is joining us from Texas, where he is the Imam at East Plano Islamic Center, also known as Epic Masjid. Sheikh Yasir Qadhi also has a degree in chemical engineering from the University of Houston, has studied at Islamic University of Medina, where he completed a BA from College of Hadith and Islamic Sciences, followed by an MA, Masters of Arts in Islamic Theology from the College of Da'wah. I ask you guys to give Sheikh Yasir your full attention. If you can limit the distractions to 0, that would be greatly appreciated. Also, throughout the event, at the end of the event, we'll be doing a Q&A session with Sheikh Yasir. So inshallah, throughout the event, if you guys want to go ahead and scan the QR code, that way inshallah, any questions you guys have, you can upload to there. With that being said, I would like to invite Sheikh Yasir Qadhi to the stage to continue with tonight's program. And Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Guys, it's a cold day outside. I needed a warmer response to that. Assalamu alaikum. That's better. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. We begin by praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and asking Allah to send salat and salam upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The question arises, why are we as Muslims so, and allow me to be frank and honest here, uniquely problematic in the Western world? And why are we always in the news? Why are we always being mentioned by politicians? I mean, you don't hear Donald Trump saying Buddhism has a problem with us. It's Islam and the Muslims. Why are we always front page? And what is going on with us internally and externally that causes us to be such a point of contention? Many things can be said. Today, inshallah, I'm going to summarize 5 reasons why Islam and Muslims in particular are always in the news, are always the topic of discussion. And based on those 5 points, try to bring about a sense of what we can do to further our discussion, to minimize any source of conflict, and to move forward, inshallah ta'ala, as a cohesive community. And of course, this 5 point is selective. There's many more points than these. The first of these 5 points, one of the reasons why Muslims always seem to be clashing with Western civilization in some levels is because Islam in particular is one of the only systems and religions that purports to have an entire ideology, an entire framework, an entire system of theology and ethics and laws. And of course, Western civilization, like any civilization, has its own ideology, its own ethics, its own laws. Now, many faiths have no laws whatsoever. Buddhism doesn't have a comprehensive sharia. The majority of faiths do not have a comprehensive system of living one's life. We as Muslims, we are told quite literally what to eat, how to eat, how to expel what we eat, how to wash ourselves after we expel what we eat, how to pray, how to marry, how to divorce, how to conduct our business transactions, what to buy, what not to buy. We are told what is haram and halal. We are told what is ethical and unethical. We are told what is moral and immoral. Most of us Muslims don't appreciate the blessings of that. On the flip side, they don't also see, well, when you don't have all of that, then you can absorb another ethical system and dimension without clashing with your own. And hence the quote-unquote integration of other communities, by and large, is easier than the quote-unquote integration of ours. Because we have an entire system and infrastructure up and running. And like every civilization, the Western civilization also has an infrastructure up and running. So when we come and live in the Western infrastructure, well, at some level there will be a clash. At some level there will be a cognitive dissonance of how we can come to terms with the contradictions between our version of ethics and the West's version of ethics, our laws and the laws of the West. And sometimes it's just our personal struggle. It doesn't have to go public. Nobody has to know how you wake up for Fajr. Nobody has to know how difficult it is to fast Ramadan. That's between me and Allah. But sometimes it really does become public. And of course the biggest example is sexual morality and LGBT and whatnot. It becomes very public. I don't want my kids to be exposed to an ethical system that I think is unethical, right? So the first reason why there is an obvious clash is because we are uniquely, now we're not the only religion that has it, and ironically, given the times we live in, the only faith that is in any way, fashion or form similar to ours is what? Judaism. It's the only faith in reality that is similar to ours, but we have certain differences with them, as the next few points are going to show. However, fact of the matter is, setting aside the political dimensions of the conflict today, fact of the matter is, from a purely secular perspective, Judeo-Muslim problems overlap with one another when they live in the secular world. The problems of a practicing Jewish person and a practicing Muslim person are very similar. And regardless of the politics, there is an element of benefit that we can do looking at how they've dealt with this, because they've lived here for 200-300 years. And they have achieved a modicum of success in some areas in this department. So that's our first point. We're going to come back to these points to offer solutions. Right now, I'm offering the problems. The second point that makes Islam uniquely different, it's not a major point, but it is a slight issue and problem in the eyes of those outside of our faith. And that is, Islam, unlike Judaism, Islam is a strong proselytizing agent. What does proselytizing mean? We want to spread and we want others to convert. Again, as most Muslims, we don't even think about this. Fact of the matter is the majority of religions are not proselytizing. They're not active in proselytizing. They don't want you to convert. In fact, in some faiths you cannot convert. Zoroastrian, you cannot convert to the Zoroastrian faith. They don't want you. They're more than happy dwindling out and dying out. They don't want somebody to come from outside. The Druze, others, there is no such thing as a convert. Judaism has so many impediments. They don't really want you. If you insist, they might grudgingly let you in. But they're not interested. They're not active out there. There's only two major proselytizing faiths in the world, Christianity and Islam. We're the only two that are active in proselytization. We want to gain converts. And we're very public about that. And we want to influence others. And that is, of course, different than many other faith traditions. Hinduism is not proselytizing. It might be one of the world's largest faiths. That's just by chance and circumstance. Not because, and that's why Hindus are geographically in one area. That's it. It's just simply by circumstance of birth. not by proselytization. We and Christianity are the only two faith traditions that are actively engaged in seeking to convert the other. Now obviously, this will represent a perceived threat, legitimately so, if you are not from within. Is that not correct, right? From the side of the other, well, you don't want me to remain as I am. You're actively engaged in trying to bring me over to another understanding. And that is absolutely true. We are proselytizing. All of you have heard how many khutbahs about da'wah, how many khutbahs about our goal here is to, preach and whatnot. And by the way, I don't necessarily agree with that simplistic slogan. And I've spoken about that, even at IAGD, I spoke about this in other places. But my point is, that is the presumption, and that is at some level that is absolutely correct, that our faith is actively engaged in trying to increase the number of its followers by engaging intellectually with the other and by attempting to dissuade and persuade the other to become one of us. And that is rare in the scope of other traditions. So obviously, that makes our faith uniquely different than other faiths as well. Not totally uniquely, but again, if you look at it, in number one, we were with Jews. In number two, we're with Christians, right? You're going to see, in every case, we really do become unique, and that will lead me to my fifth point now, jumping the gun here. So that's point number two. We're going to come back and try to explain and clarify and give solutions. Point number three, one of the reasons why, once again, the Muslim world is always in the news and every politician in the Western world mentions us, is that we are not some small, under-the-radar entity or faith tradition that nobody's ever heard of. We're not like Jainism or even Sikhism or something. No, we are a global force with a majestic history. We rule the world for 1,000 years. And our interactions with the Western world were many, much of which were not necessarily positive from the eyes of the West. So there's baggage, as you guys say here vernacularly. It's complicated, as the Facebook status is used to say, what you guys don't do. I've heard Facebook is now uncle status, so you guys don't use Facebook. So anyway, when I used to quote Facebook 20 years ago, that was so niche and cool. Now you're like, that's uncle stuff, son. So okay, it is uncle stuff, but it is complicated. Our, meaning the Muslim history, with the Western world, is not all fantastic and glorious. And especially from the perspective of the West, right? They remember the Crusades in a very different way. We remember the Crusades very differently, by the way, right? Because for us, the Crusades shows their barbarity, and it really does. But from their perspective, they're viewing the Muslim world with a sense of suspicion as well. Because we are, and we were, a global empire. We have legacy, we have history. Unlike the majority of other traditions, including Judaism, did not have an actual majestic history. They were a minority in Europe. They were never a land in modernity. We're talking about pre-biblical times, yeah, but since the advent of the Roman Empire, since the advent of Western civilization, they were never an actual political entity, unlike us. So, the Muslim land, the Muslim world, has plenty of historical interactions, plenty of past global empires, from which, if you wish to, you could selectively pick and choose and distort a version of history and propagate a myth that Muslims are out to kill us, Muslims are out to do this and that, and that's exactly what's happening right now with the BJP, the Hindutva in India. That the legacy of the Mughal Empire, I can perceive it positively, and if you listen to my lectures, I do. But if you wish to, and you are a part of the other, you could pick and choose and construct an alternative narrative. And that's what they're doing. You have the opportunity to do that with Islam because we actually were a global empire. We were a force. We do have history. We do have interactions. And whenever you have such interactions, you remove the veil of anonymity from yourself. No Western civilization can present a detailed interaction of, Shintoism, right, with the Western world. It doesn't exist. But you can with Islam and Muslim civilization. So this further complicates it. There's a lot of baggage and it's complicated. That's point number three. Point number four. One of the most awkward realities is, of course, the fact that there are so many conflicts taking place in the modern world involving Muslim nations and lands. So many. And of course, in your living history, We can talk about 9/11, the Iraq War, Afghanistan. We can talk about right now what's going on in the Middle East, but it's even before this. For those of us who are older, I'm not that old, but 1979 and what happened in Iran. And the overthrow of the Shah, and that impacted. And then the Gulf, and then the oil embargo, and then this and that. So now there are so many global conflicts that are taking place. And because the Muslim Ummah is so diverse, it has 55 nation states, 55 countries are Muslim majority, right? And Western civilization's interaction with any one of them inevitably brings in Islam into the equation. Right? Understand this point. There's 55 countries that are majority Muslim. And obviously, anything happens in any one of those countries, and of course the West does have it. Here's the irony. From our perspective, you guys interacted with us, colonization. We didn't interact with you for the last 200 years. But they ignore that point and they say, oh, we have all of these conflicts going on, and these conflicts are relatively, from their perspective, new. These conflicts are from their perspective, it's completely skewed. From their perspective, coming from Muslim lands, these guys are violent, these guys are this and that. And so it becomes easy to present a narrative that Muslims are inherently problematic. Wherever they go, conflict happens. And again, that's a one-sided view that those guys say about us. They ignore their own. By the way, again, you understand, I'm presenting their perspective. Don't misunderstand me, right? I've given many lectures to the other, audiences, non-Muslim, where I go over the fact that you can't blame us. The first, suicide bombing in Iraq took place after you guys invaded. 2,000 years, there was not a single suicide bombing. 2004, when the Americans invade Iraq, that's the first time it happens. How can you ignore your own invasion? How can you ignore this false invasion before you blame Islam and the text of Islam? But right now, speaking to a Muslim audience, so I'm explaining to you from their perspective, it becomes very easy to simply blame the religion. Blame us for the political problem. So these are 4 issues, which leads me to my 5th one. All these 4 feed into the 5th one, and that is, if there is a threat to the Western civilization as a whole, if there is another potential force that is on the rise, the number 1 on that list would be the Muslim empire, the Muslim threat. Because the Muslim threat to Western civilization encompasses all of these points. It is holistic, it is comprehensive, it has its own ethics, it has its own trajectory, it has its own history, it is global, it has the quantity of people that it needs to become a global superpower, etc., etc. And that is why, this is before you guys, many of you were born, that is why one of the most famous academics of our time, Samuel P. Huntington, famous or infamous, back in the 90s, predicted that Western civilization would have a new threat looming over the horizon. And that threat, he said, is the Muslim civilization threat to the West. And this is called the famous or the infamous Huntington's thesis of the clash of civilizations, right? This is one of the most famous academics of modern America. He is professor of political science at Harvard. And he wrote a paper in the 90s. When he wrote the paper, nobody read it twice. Only the academics read it. Standard academic stuff, right? Within a 2 years, 3 years of writing the paper, 9/11 happened. And that paper was then picked up. And it became mainstream. And the government, the White House policy picked it up. And they banked in on Samuel Huntington's clash of civilization theory, because it suited their purpose. And if you know your history and political science history, the movement known as the neocons, right? The movement known as the neocons, which was in charge of the White House for 8 years, that movement mainstreamed Huntington's thesis. And they're the ones who brought about this notion that Muslims are a threat to us, based on all of these points and more. That Muslims represent an existential threat to Western civilization. That was the slogan, or that was the underlying motif, because they needed, now this is a little bit deep, I'm going on a tangent here, but as Muslims in America, you need to understand. They needed to create an imaginary monster. They needed to create a Frankenstein. That Frankenstein was us, the Muslims. And they created this Frankenstein in order to terrify their own populations, in order to make the average American feel scared. Oh my God, the Muslims are coming. Oh my God, the terrorists, the jihadis, people are coming. When your people are scared, they don't act rationally. Terrified people don't make good decisions. Terrified people act terribly. And so post 9/11, the neocons came to power. And they started propagating this notion. They mainstreamed it. And the reason they did it is because they needed the American public, yours truly, tax-paying Joe, to hand over carte blanche authority to the government. You do whatever you want, you take care of us from that evil monster. Because the government stepped in, I should say Bush's administration stepped in particular, and that administration said, look at that terrifying Frankenstein. But hey guys, don't worry. We are your knight in shining armor. We shall save you. So, hand over your taxes, hand over your civil liberties, don't ask, you're either with us or against us. Remember that slogan? This is straight coming from the neocons, right? You're either with those monsters or you're going to hand over all your money and your taxes and your power and we shall protect you. And obviously, 9/11 was traumatic. People are completely shocked. They think it's coming out of center, left field. They can't understand why people be angry with them. We're supposed to be the good guys, right? And it is so difficult to try to explain from within that, hey, yes, inside of America, we're doing great work for our people by and large. There's a lot of problems going on, but still, internally, frankly, America has a lot of positives over many countries. But externally, our foreign policy is a disaster of the highest magnitude. Externally, we are enraging the third world left and right. We're enraging South America. Externally, we are doing so much. It's difficult for the average American to even come to terms with this, right? Because nobody wants to demonize oneself. We're supposed to be the good guys here. And so, it's much easier for the government to sell this narrative. The narrative is, literally as Bush said, they hate us because of our freedoms. They hate us because we're so good. We are the angels, they're the devils. And of course, you want to believe you're angelic. And so, they feed you these lies, and in the process, they demonize, they construct a caricature of a monster. And that monster is you and me. You guys understand all of this so far, right? Now, in the process, we are now seeing the backlash because the irony here, the Republican Party did this. I will blame them exactly because they did it. The Republican Party did this, and in the process, they created their own monster, Donald Trump. They created a monster they couldn't control, literally, because he was outside the establishment. Right? And he took charge because the system allows that to happen. An outsider can, once in a blue moon, come in. Obama was a relative outsider. Trump was a relative outsider, right? The system allows for that to happen. And in the process, again, that's exactly what happened, that they actually let the genie out of the box. And they could not temper their own, monster that they created. In any case, now, we are still stuck. I mean, literally, we're between a rock and a hard place, literally. We are still stuck because the narrative that they created, they're never going to confess that they did that, right? Even though any academic knows this is like this public policy now, right? Over $150 million were spent to demonize Muslims. Go read an academic report that was made public academic report. It's called Fear Incorporated, the Manufacture of Islamophobia in America. I forgot the subtitle, but it's called Fear Incorporated. Fear, INC. You can find this online, just PDF it. Fear Incorporated, the manufacturing of Islamophobia, something like this, the manufacturing of Islamophobia in North America. It's like a 50-page, simple, charts, logistics, where the money comes from, how is it spent. People like Fox News, Sean Hannity, Glenn Beck in the day, these were the mouthpieces, the ideologues, the brains were, Zionist professors who hated our guts, that same thing. Now, this modern conflict in Gaza and Palestine, it is being viewed in the exact same light as the past. And that's why, I don't know about Michigan, I traveled so much, it's all a blur to me. I forgot where I was. Where was I 3 days ago? I was in some state in America. And I'm driving by the highway, and I literally see a flag of Israel and, one of the hostages that have been taken, and say, this is not just about them and us, it's about the Western world versus them. It's not about Israel and Palestine, sorry. It's about us and them. That's what it was. On the billboard. It was in Florida. Just on the billboard, just going down, which is not surprising, by the way, yeah. With utmost respect to those that have lived in Florida, obviously, but every state has its flavor, and Texas is not that far off, to be honest, and there's pockets of good everywhere, but still, there's a majority you have to worry about. My point is that the narrative that is being presented is exactly what the neocons did. This is not a conflict about Gaza versus the apartheid regime. It is a conflict between our freedoms, quote unquote, versus those guys, right? Now, the question arises, what can we do to overcome this? What is the way forward? And the response to this is that I wish I could summarize in 20 minutes the way forward. I wish it were that easy. I wish that I could bullet point for you. We do this, and we'll magically solve the problem. The reality is, nobody knows for sure. A lot of times, the world is so difficult to navigate. Frankly, at some level, it is depressing. And I'm going to be honest here, and I know many of you feel this way. The current conflict in Gaza and the sheer arrogance that our politicians and countries and the whole Western world has in not even paying verbal, not even air from your mouth to support to give some words of comfort to the people that are being massacred. The sheer barbaric inhumanity. Even I, and I'm a student of history, am shocked. It's not even a semblance of morality, right? And one thing we realize in the West, and I'm sorry to be blunt, but I mean, there's a genocide going on. I'm sorry to offend your feelings, but there are people getting killed here. The Western Muslim community has had to come to terms with how completely impotent it is in dealing with our own governments. We are defanged, detoothed. We have no status in the eyes of our own peoples. And that's a bitter, bitter, bitter pill to swallow. And I speak especially to college students, and again, sorry to be blunt, but I have to bring in the Islamic stuff. In some ways it is healthy because all this leftist liberal crap is now out the window. Your blood is not equal to anybody else's. You've seen this now. You're not worth anything in their eyes. Doesn't matter how left-wing you are, how woke you were, doesn't matter which causes you joined. In the end of the day, reality has come out. And there is supremacy to civilizations and skin colors and even faiths that you used to belong to. And guys, we're on the wrong side of that supremacist equation. Do you guys understand what I'm saying here? And I'm sorry to be blunt here, but if this is not going to be a wake-up call, then what else is? If this is not going to be a wake-up call, then what else is? So then, this is the perfect opportunity for us now to begin our difficult and awkward conversations. Now, I'm not going to pretend, like I said, in 20 minutes, I don't have all the answers, by the way. Anybody who says he does or she does, I'm sorry, they're probably part of the problem, because one of our problems is simplistic sloganeering. One of our problems is platitudes, sound good but don't mean anything. Return to the Quran and Sunnah. Okay, how? Okay, the answer is in the Khilafah. Okay, what? Go back to Tawheed. We're all believing in Allah. Again, these simplistic slogans that people throw at you, sounds good. Put them on a poster and put them on your masjid, but it's not solving the genocide. It's not really changing anything, right? So the brutal fact of the matter is, there are no easy answers. But if we at least are humble enough to understand the situation is very complicated, and to understand the journey ahead of us is very long, and to begin the process, then inshallah we have achieved a massive victory. Because part of getting to the answer is to understand that you need to begin the journey for the answer. To have the inkling that, hey, I don't know and I need to know. To know that you don't know is a blessing. You understand this point? Because to think you know, well, you're not going to go anywhere. To know that you don't know, and to have a sense of humility, wow, this is overwhelming, and I need help. And we need help collectively. That is the beginning of the positive journey to realization of an answer. So I'm going to share some of my own personal thoughts in this regard, and go over some of these points, and then inshallah open the floor for Q&A. So, let us go back to these 5 points one by one. The issue of comprehensive life, the issue of comprehensive ethos, comprehensive ethic, comprehensive system of laws and whatnot. One of the problems that comes is that we, the Muslim community, has never really been given the opportunity to flourish in a modern Western liberal democracy. So we are coming to terms ourselves. What does it mean to be a part of a system where I have to give in order to receive? Again, this is atypical. The Muslim world, generally speaking, has been historically under the caliphate or under a majority Muslim land. And therefore, the laws of the land reflected the ethos of Islam. This is the first time where we have to live quid pro quo. In order to get my freedoms, I need to give you your freedoms. It's a new world, undocumented world. And we're all navigating. What does that mean? So, if I have to fight for your religious liberties, that means I have to fight for your right to commit shirk and kufr. Am I going to fight for your right to commit shirk so that I can commit tawheed? This is the contradiction. Am I going to fight for your right to commit shirk so that I can perfect my tawheed? That's a question that we've never had to ask in the past. But that's the way this world works. And in fact, my position is very clear. It happened in Dallas actually. A corporation wanted to ban religious symbols, and they would ban, so it was actually a Christian person wearing a cross and something, and so they gave a decree that, hey, or they gave a policy, hey, no religious symbols. And if they had banned that, the next thing would have been to ban the hijab, right? And so the company employees came to me and said, there's a Christian organization taking the company to court. They're getting our donations and petitions. Can we join and help fight for the right to wear a cross? This is an actual case that happened. Can we fight for the right to wear a cross? Even though we're Muslims, we're not wearing the cross. But can we fight for the right to wear the cross so that it'll protect the hijab of our sisters in that community? And I said, and I know some of the conservatives are going to, it is what it is. It's a battle we're all waging. My biggest battle, by the way, is between the ultra-fanatic conservatives. That's the mindset that I have to deal with, is that those who perceive themselves to be the guardians of the faith are not willing to think outside the box, right? And so, if you look at constantly the harassment I get and the threats I get and the excommunication I get, it always comes from those ultra-conservatives, because they can't understand you have to live in a different world. I can't go back to the past. I cannot quote you Ibn Taymiyyah or Al-Ghazali about how to live in modern secular America. I have to think on my own. And the minute you think on your own, well, these groups of people are threatened. Who do you think you are to go against my sheikh? And I'm like, I'm sorry, but your sheikh is not living the world we're living in. With utmost love and respect to him, it's a different part of the hemisphere. In any case, I said to this employee, of course you must. You must. That's quid pro quo. There is no alternative. And your niyyah is not that committing shirk. Your niyyah is, oh Allah, I want this company to be not enforcing any sharia, any policy. I just want to have neutrality. And they won the court, alhamdulillah. They were not able to stop the hijab from getting banned, right? Again, this is a reality you're going to have to navigate. Now, it's not always that easy, because I'm not willing for my children to be exposed to alternative sexualities. And I will draw the line there. That's not the same as an adult choosing what to wear, what not to wear. And so I am trying my best. And I've been very public about this. And you guys in Michigan, mashallah, hats off to you, mashallah, you guys have taken a stand. That this is public school, tax-paying dollars, and I don't want to teach versions of sexual morality that go against my morality to a 7-year-old, a 5-year-old. What are you doing teaching? Don't teach anything, I don't mind, but don't teach your version. Now, how do we navigate this? Because again, this is not easy to do. What if the other side were to say, how about faith traditions? Should we not be neutral in faith traditions? Do you want us to teach Christianity as positive and Islam as negative? You're going to say, no, that's not fair. So then, I'm just saying, what if somebody from that alternative lifestyle were to say, we're asking the exact same thing? Mutual respect for all. Do you understand the conundrum here, right? Do you understand this conundrum here? It's not it's not easy. And I don't have a solid answer, except to say that sexuality is not the same as theology. Sexuality can be and should be a private matter, whereas theology is something that is public. And so, I think the compromise is to just say, let's not teach sexuality in public schools. But then, of course, the flip side comes, but this is public education. And at some level, sexuality needs to be taught, which is also correct, right? You do need to teach the basics of life. So again, I'm talking to you very frankly here. I don't have an easy answer. Because yes, as Muslims, we do have an idea of what we want to preserve. But if you are removing religion from the picture and approaching it from a purely secular perspective, frankly, many of our arguments lose some of the weight and steam we think they have. Do you understand what I'm saying here? Right? So there's no easy answer. So I don't know what to say to this. Let's come together and discuss. But my point is that when it comes to Islam's complete system of laws and the fact that everything is indeed dictated, we will have to have very frank conversations. What aspects of the law for us are immutable and what aspects we can rethink for time and place. And this is the fundamental battle that is taking place amongst clerics of our time. How much can we organically change? And how much is immutable? This is a question that is not easy to answer. Gender and gender roles. Alimony. Can we change Islamic laws about alimony? And then, I know this is not a fiqh class here, but I'm giving you some practical examples. Most of you are not married yet, so you don't understand, maybe I'm not trying to be patronizing, but frankly, you don't understand the problems of alimony both ways. Both ways. Giving, not giving. Taking, not taking. It's a huge problem. Sharia does not have an internal alimony system. So if you're married to somebody for 30 years, you divorce her, you give her the mahar, which, when you got married was $1,000. Now that $1,000 is worth peanuts, right? So here's the mahar, end of story. There is no alimony in the Sharia. The woman's going to say, hey, hold on a sec. I was your partner for 30 years. I took care of all the kids. I was a homemaker. And I sacrificed my career because I wanted to protect this marriage. For whatever reason you want me to let me go, I need to have something for myself. And the man's going to say, oh, Sharia says this. Actually, Sharia doesn't say, fiqh says it, but Sharia says this. What do we do? Is there leeway to bring in a version of alimony? Are we changing God's law? A lot of people that are very, what's a nice way to say this? Wanting to preserve a historical interpretation of fiqh are adamant, no, we can't do anything. And others, and I'm one of them, and I'm sorry, I'm going to be blunt here, the Sharia cannot allow an innocent lady to just be discarded on the streets without being taken care of. Something has to be done. The world has changed. And once upon a time there was a tribal system, once upon a time there was other aspects, and yes, it was, but now there is no tribal system. Now, and this, you guys don't have to deal, you have to deal with this. The scholars have to deal with this. I get cases all the time. Marriage takes place in Pakistan in the 90s. The man comes here, makes this successful, makes it rich. Now that he's rich, he wants to find a prettier wife, whatever, get rid of his wife for 30 years, and he comes to the contract, hey, 1,000 rupees, that's like $1.50 these or whatever it is, right? 1,000 rupees, that's all I'm going to give my wife, right? And the wife's like, I gave up everything, I came to this land, everything, and now I have no alternative, I have nowhere to go. What is the Sharia solution? It's not easy because we have to battle Western law because our sisters are going to say, I don't care what your Maulana Sahab says, I'm going to get my 50% according to the law of Michigan. Because you're not giving me anything. And I have to say, is it fair that she gets 50% because of what? And again, I'm just asking, is it 50%? Did she do the 50% effort? I mean, what's the name of the richest guy in the world that divorced his wife? She gets like $3.5 billion. I mean, I don't think she did $3.5 billion of housework, did she? Right? Yeah. But she got $3.5 billion for the settlement. Is that fair? I don't know. I don't know. Is it not? These are difficult discussions to have. But unless and until we're brave enough to have a frank conversation without demonizing the other. I'm not trying to change the Sharia of Allah. I'm trying to preserve the Sharia. And the way to preserve it, we have to be bold enough to ask difficult questions. The classic issue of, the simple issue of moon sighting. We're still struggling over it. How literal do you want to be? Right? How explicit do you want to be in this regard? Must we discard calculations and just go with visual because that's the way historically it was? Or can we be a little bit like, okay, the goal is to bring the community together, the goal is to maximize the number of people for Eid, that's the ultimate goal. And if we can do so by announcing a month in advance, booking one hall rather than fighting till 12 midnight the day before, going over, is Saudi seeing the moon, is Mauritania seeing the moon, if we just get rid of all of that and simply say, for the sake of bringing the community together, hey guys, we know that the moon will physically be born at this point in time, and so we'll assume that is when Eid and that is when Ramadan. And that's what, I'm also involved with the Fiqh Council, and Dr. Zulfikar is also involved with the Fiqh Council. That's the fatwa we give. And of course, once again, we have a whole group of, with respect, a lot of scholars say, oh, this is wrong, you're changing the Sharia. That's that clash here. So, bottom line, there is leeway for change, but it's not easy discovering what is allowed and what isn't allowed. Because we all agree that there are going to be immutables. We all agree certain things will never be allowed, right? Alcohol never becomes haram just because it's popular. Okay, marijuana, khamr, all of these things, LGBT is not going to become halal just because it's the status quo. So we're going to have to be brave enough. My first point, move on to the other four. My first point, we're going to have to be brave enough, bold enough to understand there is a diversity of thought. And you're going to have some people who wish to maintain the historic, perspective of the traditional schools, and they're going to import those schools into America and stick with them. Respect to them. I'm not saying they're evil people, astaghfirullah. But there are others, and I'm one of them, who are going to say, hey look, the traditional schools, we respect them, but Allah didn't reveal those schools. And those schools can be modified for the North American scene. And Allah allows, the Sharia allows for this modification. It's not changing the Sharia. The Sharia has come with internal factors to allow that change. So I would say, it is possible to adopt our system of laws so that we can live in a Western secular democracy without compromising the fundamentals of what we believe. Now there's going to be compromises externally, what I see, what I interact with. But in my personal life, secular democracy is minimally infringing on my rights. Is that clear, right? And therefore, because it's not forcing me to worship other than Allah, it's not forcing me to act immorally, by and large, my purity is saved. And on the Day of Judgment, I have no excuse. I can be a good Muslim. So that's the first point. I don't see it as a clash, and many Muslims do not. The second point, the issue of proselytization and the issue of influencing. Fox News was rampant about this back in the day. They demonized the term da'wah, da'wah, da'wah. And of course, jihad became synonymous with God knows what else. So, are we out to proselytize to the world? Is our job and secret mission to infiltrate every single, society and to slowly and surely take over from within? Because that's what Fox News was saying. The goal of da'wah of these Muslims is to infiltrate Western society and to slowly but surely make it into an Islamic society. So, the second question, is it really our goal to convert the rest of the world? Here is where I say, there's something called aspirational goal, and there's something called tactical goal. Aspirational, without a doubt, we want everybody to understand our faith and believe in it. And we should not be embarrassed to say this loudly and clearly and boldly. What is wrong? What is illegal about wanting people to follow my faith? Why are you criminalizing and demonizing this? Let Christians want people to be Christians. And let us want others to be Muslims. Fair and square. And let the best da'wah win. No problem. But tactically and aspirationally, are we secretly convening in some basement like the Illuminati allegedly and planning out, we're going to have 2 Muslims there and 3 Muslims there? No. Tactically, we're not doing anything to convert anybody. We're not doing anything to take over anything. There is no tactical vision, because again, that was probably you're too young to remember this, but for the longest time, like 4 or 5 years, 6 years, there was this notion, what is Sharia? This is before your time, right? They attempted to ban Sharia in 22 states. You guys know about this or not? So you are too young, I'm speaking to the new generation, you remember these days, right? 22 states, they attempted to ban Sharia. When I was doing my PhD, this is 2006, 2007, so before your time. So, 22 states successfully, or partially successfully, banned Sharia. Why? Because they define Sharia as the stealth takeover of America by the Muslims. And they brought forth innocuous statements of da'wah and of preaching and of teaching. And they said, Islam is a political ideology, not a religious ideology. So we have to be very clear here and say, you cannot criminalize the aspirational dream of wanting people to believe like I believe. That's what the Constitution guarantees. And if I go and preach and teach, it's a free world, and that's the whole point of this country being free. And I have the right to preach and teach, and the right to convince, and the right to persuade, and you have the right to counter that argument. And if in the process people do convert, well then, good for them and good for our system. And if they don't, here's where I say to the Muslims, then you must live and let live. لَكُمْ دِينُكُمْ وَلِيَ دِينِ. We have to be clear here. We do not have any right, neither from the Sharia nor from this Constitution, to force our way on other people. We can't do that. لَكُمْ دِينُكُمْ وَلِيَ دِينِ. So this is the second point. We embrace the aspirational vision, and we clearly say there is no political ideology and vision in this regard. There is no threat that a bunch of Muslims are coming together and daydreaming of. There's nothing like this happening. So this is my second point. The third point, and that is that historical interactions with past, and not many of them have been positive. We actually say many of them were very positive. Many of them were actually extremely positive. And in fact, we can faithfully state that much of what is now perceived as Western values of enlightenment, their bases came from our Islamic faith tradition. Dr. Zulfiqar has written a book about this, and you can read more about that in the book. But the fact of the matter is that it was Western civilization's interaction with the Muslim world that gave them some of the key values of the Magna Carta, some of the key values of even what we consider to be the freedom from oppression against the tyrant. Medieval Christianity viewed the king as being representative of God on earth. You had no right to question the king. It was only when they interacted with the Muslims and they realized that in Islam, the Sultan, the Khalifa, has to follow the laws from above. The Sharia outweighs the Sultan. And there are laws that are more sacred than the Sultan, that they began to rethink through. And there is a theory, and I am sympathetic to it, that the Magna Carta, which is the bedrock of modern Western civilization, the Magna Carta is actually a product of the first interactions from the Crusaders returning from Muslim lands. And the rest, as they say, is history. Without a doubt, much of the Enlightenment, much of the Protestant Reformation, without a doubt, is coming from Islam. I mean, this is common sense, right? What is Protestant Christianity? No intermediaries between man and God. You don't pray to saints and the Virgin Mary, right? Repentance is from God directly. And Martin Luther, it is well known, read the Quran. He didn't like it, he wrote a refutation, but ironically, he's preaching many. You read the Quran directly. Martin Luther's like, read the Bible directly. You don't need to go through clergy. That's why he translated the Bible. That's why he printed the Bible. Because he realized the Muslims are reading the Quran. We need to do the same to our book as well. Now, I'm not saying it's exactly the same, because it's not exactly the same. But without a doubt, the catalyst, the seed, is coming. As for the Reformation, again, well known. And I'm not one to like romanticize and wax historic about false, platitudes. I hate that type of stuff. Without a doubt, guys, I'm sorry to be blunt here, the Western Renaissance did amazing things in spite of us, without a doubt. But without a doubt, we influenced the Renaissance. Is that clear? I'm trying to give both some slack. In other words, we could have, we should have, but we didn't. We could have and should have done what they did, but we didn't. And they took 20, 30, 40% and they made their 100%. But without a doubt, 20, 30, 40% came from us. I'm even being factual. I'm not even saying 50%. But definitely not 5, 10%. Get my point? At least a third, roughly, وَثُلُثُ كَثِيرٌ. I would say like a good percentage. And if you don't believe me, Isaac Newton was reading Al-Khawarizmi. If you don't believe me, Galileo was reading some of the ancient Muslim minds, right? Ibn Sina was one of the first textbooks translated into Latin, had 17 printings. For 200 years, the standard textbook of medicine for Western medicinal colleges across Italy, across France, across Germany, for 250 years, it was Al-Qanun fi al-Tibb. And in fact, the word canon in English exists in English because Ibn Sina's Al-Qanun was translated into Latin, and they said Al-Kanun, Al-Canon. And from Al-Canon, we got the English word canon. Canon comes from Al-Qanun. So without a doubt, we help shape much of Western ideas that are now mainstream. So we need to reclaim the narrative. And we do so by being factual. Don't wax historic and pretend that the Renaissance is all on us. No, it's not. But I'm saying the impetus, the catalyst, the kernel, without a doubt, we have a lot to do with it. And the Reformation, the same can be said. So my point is in this third point, we need to reclaim and say, hey, look, it's true. We've had negative interactions, but we also had positive interactions. And if you want to see some of the positive interactions, look at Islam in Andalusia and Spain, and you see quite a lot of amazing historical facts here. This leads me to my fourth point, and then the fifth one is automatically solved. The fourth point, which is modern conflicts. This one, without a doubt, is one of the most difficult. Why is it the most difficult? Because in order to solve this problem, what is required is a level of bravery and courageousness on behalf of the one listening to you. What is required is that the person who is listening to you is willing to rethink through and is willing to see that these conflicts have more to do with politics than with religion. Now, so much is easy. Anybody can see that, right? But the problem comes once they understand this point, the awkward reality of the fact that those political engagements stem from injustices perpetuated by the West against the East. That's the awkward reality. And that, there's no easy battle. Because it is so comforting to be told by your leaders, they hate us for our freedoms. It is so comforting to be placated. The older uncle, aunt just pats you on the shoulder, you're a good boy, that bully's the one who deserves everything. And of course, as a child, you want to believe that. Of course, you're not going to think, what did I do to do that? Maybe I did something. It's very difficult. And this is where it's our most difficult battle. And post 9/11, we had a really difficult time. And we weren't necessarily successful. You know, I used to do a lot of public teaching back then, and now I'm doing different types of teaching. There's an article in the New York Times about me, like 15 years ago. It's a front page story about me, you can see it. The title of it was, Why Yasir Qadhi Wants to Talk About Jihad. That's the title. Go Google it, it's on the New York Times, right? It's actually a very positive portrayal of me in that article. But the point being that that article delineated the conundrum of trying to be a moderate preacher in this country. Because in order to do so, you would have to speak the truth. And speaking the truth meant factually describing what our own country is doing in those lands. And nobody wants to hear it. Even now, the average American, I mean, alhamdulillah, it's changing. The average American doesn't know how much we finance Israel, how much we, go to court for Israel. As I explained in my number of lectures, the 5 superpowers from post-World War II who have veto power in the UN, by the way, pause here, how criminally unjust that 5 countries have veto power. There is no equality. And please, if you're still thinking there is, get rid of this naive notion. No, rich and powerful people will always act tyrannical if they don't have fear of God. Rich and powerful civilizations will act in ways that are completely unethical and immoral, and we see this. And this is why we need religion in our lives. This is why Iman changes everything. Because you have to have belief in a higher power to treat people as humans. So, these 5 countries that have veto power, America is one of them, right? America has used its veto power around 92 times since World War II. 92, 93. America has used its veto power 92 times. 47 of them were on behalf of Israel. The average American has no clue. It's as if we are the puppies, we are the guard dogs. We're the ones protecting that minor country over there. $16 billion we just approved. Over the course of the last 40 years, $150 billion given to that country. The average American is completely unaware. And it's our job to teach them this. Now, thankfully, this is one of the positives. When 9/11 happened, it was really awkward to talk about because it's USA versus Iraq, USA versus Afghanistan, and it became super sensitive, right? And it was really difficult to navigate. You guys did not see that era. It was a very difficult era. Hardly any Islamic preacher was trying to explain contextually because you dare try to do that and it would be perceived as if you are justifying terrorism. And I have acquaintances and friends that were charged with criminal offenses or thrown out or whatever because of merely speaking political stuff. It's really sensitive. But here's a benefit about Israel and Gaza. Israel is not the USA. Israel is not the USA. In spite of what these people want you to believe. And so when you bring in, hold on a second, why are we spending $150 billion in Israel? Why are we giving military aid to another country? $150 billion, it would solve our healthcare problem. Our education system would become the top 10 in the world. Why are we spending our tax dollars in another country? And that's why, for the first time, even the far right, even Fox News, is beginning to question, is this America first or Israel first? Because Israel is not the United States of America. We can actually factually differentiate the us versus them. Because it's not us, it is Israel versus them. Why are we taking a stance over here? And this is where I come to my final point, which is these challenging times we live in requires a level of courage and maturity, requires a level of visionary thinking that, frankly, we haven't done up until now. We haven't done it. But Allah has chosen you to be alive at this time and place. Hence, it comes on you all to have this visionary thought. And one of the biggest positives of what is happening in Gaza right now, one of the biggest positives is that we are forced to galvanize, we are forced to question, we are forced to think outside the box. We all feel a sense of genuine, righteous rage. We feel a sense of humiliation, a sense of abandonment, a sense of dehumanization. And we all realize that's not right, it's not fair, it's not ethical, it's not American the way we were taught what American values are. We all realize that. In my humble opinion, that rage that you feel, it is the biggest positive that we are seeing for our community. Because with that rage, you shall channel it. Not to do something unrighteous, not to do something unethical, but to have the courage and the fortitude and the forbearance and the wisdom to be visionaries. To fight for your rights and the rights of your children after you. To realize this is a fight for our survival, our humanity. It really is. It's not just about us as the American Muslim community anymore. It's about us as human beings in our country allowing this genocide, supporting this genocide. How can that happen? And so, bottom line, I actually believe the survival of Islam in America is essential for the survival of America as an ethical and moral nation. We have to be this country's conscience because nobody else seems to have it. We have to be the heartbeat of this land. And guess what? We have the resources with all of these positives, and we have the quantity, and we have the quality to do that. So if every one of us were to rise up, and if every one of us were to do our role, if every one of us were to think long term, because this might not happen in my lifetime or yours, but if we lay the foundations and think long term, then insha'Allah ta'ala, our presence here can be a game changer. Because the fact of the matter is, if we continue along this trajectory, subhanAllah, no country that supports such brutality ever flourishes. No country that is so callous to its own people. I mean, it surprises me. There are tens of thousands of people sleeping on the streets of every major city. I don't know if you've ever been to Los Angeles and that district. I have. You know, the district of all the, it's like unbelievable this is happening. I've hardly seen anything like it in any third world country. And we're allowing this to happen while we're spending billions of dollars overseas. We need to stand up. We need to claim our Islamic heritage and yes, our American heritage as well. And we need to fight for our rights. We need to do whatever we can and become activists for the future of not only of our faith, for the future of this country and this land and of our own humanity. So bottom line, and to summarize, I believe that our religion is one of, if not the most important mechanisms for the survival of this country, really. And if every one of us were to live up to the ideals of our faith, and if every one of us were to become activists based upon our ethics and values, not only will our lives be enriched, not only will we attain meaning in our existence on earth, we will, inshallah ta'ala, start a massive tidal wave of change. And we will be at the vanguard of creating a ripple effect. We might not live to see the results, but we shall be a part of the process. And on the Day of Judgment, Allah will reward us based upon the efforts that we have done. And so with this, inshallah ta'ala, we open the floor for Q&A and have some time for discussion, inshallah. Where's the Q&A? Is it going to be there? Okay, perfect. Bismillah. Okay, Bismillah. So, first question we have here. What is our role as Muslim students in terms of activism? Is it acceptable to take a more silent approach for fear of career prospects and becoming more active once someone has become more established? So, I actually answered this question 2-3 weeks ago at Miftah, right here, close by. They asked me the exact same question. You can see it online. And I basically said, every one of you needs to decide what your comfort level is. Every one of you needs to decide what can you sacrifice now versus later on. Nobody can make that up for you. And don't feel guilty if you need to wait for a better time and place. Understandable. But wherever you are, push back to a level that doesn't get you into trouble, but does make the other person start thinking. Wherever you are, there are ways to do that. Don't be totally complicit and silent. Now, obviously, you're not going to raise your voice at every single gathering, every single place, but you have to decide, and like I said as well, that which sacrifices you make, only you can decide. Which circumstances you're going to stand up and take a stand, that depends on you, your character, your courage, the situation, how much of an impact you're going to have as well. All of these are factors that only you can decide. But every one of us needs to push the envelope a little bit more. Every one of us needs to do our job. In the end of the day, Allah Azza wa Jal will only call us to task for what we can do. Question number 2, when you talk about preserving your identity, how do you know which identity? There are so many sects, so many different rulings. For example, some people eating meat, zabiha, how do we go about choosing right and wrong? So, you follow the group of scholars you look up to the most, and don't get involved in sectarian internal battles. Simple as that. There's a whole bunch of mainstream groups. Stay with any mainstream group. What is mainstream? Mainstream is one that has a massive quantities of people, because the religion of Islam is not a cult. The religion of Islam is not a cult, and quantity does mean something. So if you're following a sheikh that has only 5 people and the rest of the world according to him is kafir, well then you're following the wrong sheikh. Literally, I'm telling you, okay? If you're following the one masjid in all of Detroit, right, that says we are the correct masjid, and every other masjid is going to go to Jahannam, well then frankly you're in the wrong masjid, okay? Find a moderate, mainstream community. Another characteristic of mainstream isn't just acceptance and moderation, but historical trajectory. It should have a sense of scholarship. Lots of people in the past, they can quote, they have a continuity. Our religion is not new. Allah didn't reveal it yesterday. We have tradition. And I label myself, this is my own label, forward-thinking traditionalist. Because without tradition, we're nothing. Right? Without tradition, we're nothing. But me personally, I want to also push forward. So I don't like quote-unquote progressive Islam. I'm just being honest with you, I don't like it because I think that they've cut off from tradition. And when you're cut off from tradition, then you're kind of lost because you can't understand Islam without tradition, right? At the same time, this is my personal 2 cents, I'm also not a full traditionalist. Why? Because traditionalism is not divine. Traditionalism is a human construct. It's Muslims of the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 10th centuries interacting with the society of their time and place. And that's fine. But we are now currently in the 15th Islamic Hijri century, the 21st, 22nd Gregorian century. We're living in America. We're living in a democracy. We're living in a liberal land. I'm sorry, but none of the classical ulama ever had any of these realities. So, I don't mind studying the tradition, but I am not wed to the tradition. I come from within the tradition, and I'm willing to re-engage the tradition in light of modernity. Now that is scary, and a lot of traditionalists balk, and they're like, oh, this guy's a deviant, this guy's a heretic, this guy's a reformist. It's going to be a constant battle. You guys have to be mature enough to understand this is the battle that is perpetuated every generation, right? Because the irony, I don't want to get too deep here, the irony of ironies, every single one of these traditionalist movements, listen to me carefully, themselves was founded by a visionary who broke away from the tradition of his time. Or else there wouldn't be a traditionalist movement. Every single founder of every one of these strands that thinks it is traditional, their founder asked them, who founded your tradition? Oh, so-and-so in the 15th century, so-and-so in the 16th, so-and-so in the 17th century. Okay, well, what did he do? He broke away from the status quo of his time and place, and he did something to revive the religion. And you guys forgot the spirit of revival, and you're following the words that happen to come from a cultural context, ignoring you have the right to have the same spirit, but in light of your cultural context. Does that make sense here? Right? So I am a forward-thinking traditionalist. At the same time, I respect traditionalist movements, and I know that they have good in them. I just personally think, this is my personal opinion, by the way, after having been a hardcore traditionalist for 10, 15 years of my life, if you know me from back in the day, if you see my videos from back in the 1990s and 2000, I have no qualms. It's not a, I don't, I'm very, not only embarrassed to say, I'm very happy. I went through a phase where I really was a hardcore literalist, fundamentalist, traditionalist. I understand the appeal. There's familiarity. There's comfort. It's a baby blanket. You love being in it because everybody's been there. You love there. But that baby blanket doesn't allow you to walk into the desert. Doesn't allow you to walk into not the desert, I would say, to walk into a circumstance you haven't walked into before, right? You can't leave the comfort of your bed, as I'm trying to say. The baby blanket, you're in the bed. It's comfortable. You're not solving the problems outside of where you are. And so traditionalism looks to the past. Traditionalism wants to regurgitate, and that's why when you go to any traditionalist environment, they go back to the controversies of 1,000 years ago, the controversies of 500 years ago. You're rarely going to find a traditionalist talking to you about LGBT in America, talking to you about voting and activism, the legalities and parameters. This is not a conversation they're comfortable with. They're much more comfortable discussing what does istawa al-arsh mean, how many categories of qadr are there, how do we pray fiqh according to this madhab, and that's fine, that needs to be done, no problem, but they're not solving problems of modernity, are they, right? And so, I understand the appeal of traditionalism, and if you find comfort in those movements, good for you, alhamdulillah, but find a mainstream movement that's not concentrating on nitpicking and finding fault with other Muslims. But in my humble opinion, those movements will preserve a level of iman, but they're not going to facilitate the flourishing of Islam in the Western world. That's my humble opinion and my own experiences with traditionalism. If you really want Islam to flourish, you're going to have to break away from hardcore traditionalism. Because Allah didn't reveal hardcore traditionalism. Allah revealed the Quran and He sent a Prophet. And the Quran and the Prophet ﷺ, they're meant for all of humanity, every age, every time. And therefore, we here in America must go back to the Quran and Sunnah through the tradition, and see what can we do to facilitate the flourishing of Islam in these lands? Even if it means breaking away from tradition, but following the Quran and Sunnah. Does that make sense here, right? Now, of course, I'm biased because I am, I've been through that journey, and so I cannot tell you follow this person or that person. All I'm saying, follow a mainstream person who has lineage and history, coming from a tradition that has a connection to scholarship and authority, and whatever you do, live and let live. Don't follow a tradition that problematizes other traditions more than it problematizes people outside of enemies of the faith, right? Because fanaticism is a massive problem. And every tradition has its fanatics, every tradition. So if you're going to follow a tradition, follow the moderate people of that tradition. And I can't tell you which one to follow because that's circular. Guys, you're talking to somebody who has my own views. I have my own understanding, my own... So obviously, you want to listen to what I have to say, listen to my lectures, right? But listen, I'm being blunt here. Whether you follow me or another sheikh, it means nothing in the eyes of Allah. We are not appointed by Allah. Only the Prophet ﷺ is the one person that is appointed by Allah. So follow any sheikh that you like. Follow any scholar that your heart finds comfort in. But I'm giving you some generic guidelines. And I hope these generic guidelines, inshallah ta'ala, make sense. Question 3. What is the best approach to correct something we see in a Muslim stranger? For example, advising nail polish, fake lashes, short, tight clothing, too much makeup. Wow. How does one approach this? So, listen to me, guys. You're going to have to be careful here. How does one go about answering this question without digging a hole from which it's difficult to return? Listen, one of the psychological OCDs that many people have, and this is a common observable phenomenon in every discipline, not just in Islam, is that in circumstances where you cannot control the bigger factors, you become obsessed with the smaller factors. In circumstances where you cannot control the more important decisions and aspects, in order to overcompensate, human psyche becomes obsessed with the smaller issues that you can control. This is not just religious related. This is an observable, psychological, cultural, anthropological phenomenon. Okay? Let me give a simple example in the prison gangs and whatnot, right? The prisoners are locked up in jail. And they're divided into gangs amongst the most petty issues. And they have the most ridiculous set of laws amongst themselves. If you ever talk to anybody that's been in prison, right? You don't cross this line, you put your fork this way, you walk this way. They become obsessed with these minutiae, despite the fact that they're in prison. And if you dare go against your gang's, protocol and do something that the other gang says you shouldn't do, they're gonna lose and they're whatever, and they start beating you up, whatnot. What am I trying to say here? Where they've lost control of their lives, they try to regain it by becoming obsessed over imaginary laws that they themselves have invented inside of their prison cells. Do you guys see this point here, right? We have a genocide going on, and we're obsessed with nail polish. I'm being brutally honest here, right? It's a human psychological phenomenon that I can't control the world. We no longer have a khilafah. The Muslim world is divided into 55 countries. Oh my God, this beard is only 1 inch. A'udhu billah, this guy's the deviant here. You see? I'm just pointing at you randomly just up and then you say, okay. I pointed at Dr. Zafar, the one person that I shouldn't point at, I pointed at him, sorry. But he can take it, mashallah, that's why. Do you not understand that this is a overcompensation for a false bravado? I can't control what I need to control. So let me become obsessed with what I can control. Okay, your pant is too tight, brother. He's not wearing a pant, I'm joking. Right?
I'm gonna look down.
You're gonna look down. It's below the ankle, astaghfirullah, bro. We'll become obsessed. Mine are below the ankle, by the way. Why? Because read fiqh. I'm sorry, with utmost respect, I have read fiqh, okay? That's the problem. Your version of fiqh is your version. It's not Allah's version. And you hear one opinion and you think that's it. No. And I understand, because I'm not trying to be patronizing. I was the same way 20, 30 years ago. I was the exact same way. I know how it feels. You're surrounded by a bubble of shuyukh. They all think the same, talk the same, act the same, dress the same. Now you exit that bubble and you meet, astaghfirullah, he wears a jacket, a'udhu billah. No topi! How can he be a Maulana Sahab? Well, thank God I don't call myself Maulana. I have no Maulana. Don't worry about that. But still, by the way, the number one comment from our homelands in India and Pakistan on my YouTube videos, the number one comment, he doesn't have a topi, how can he give Islamic lecture? And like I said, it's a psychological issue. I don't blame them. Wallahi, I don't blame them. Their whole lives, that's all they can think about, is the length of the beard and the topi and whatnot. So my point is, these issues that you brought up, wallahi, they are not the biggest issues. I'm not saying that they're totally trivial either. But when a person is struggling to pray 5 times a day, you don't bring up the nail polish and hijab and eyelashes. Do you get my point here? When a person is far from the deen, let's bring about a sense of love of Allah and His Messenger. And eventually, and here, I'm going to be honest here, eventually, yes, we do need to discuss how should a man interact with a woman, how should a woman interact with a man, how should a man dress, how should a woman dress. I'm not saying it's unimportant. But on a scale of 1 to 100, right, this is going to come in the bottom 50, not the top 50. That which we can agree to? That which we can agree to? So then, let's prioritize the top 50 first. Let's worry about that. I'm not trivializing and saying we don't. But I'm saying, if you see somebody that is problematizing the bottom 20, 30 issues, and you don't even know that person, in all likelihood they have issues in the top 20, 30 that they haven't dealt with, well, let's work with that first. And let's push our way forward in this regard. Also, one of the things that, again, we have to be blunt here, and I'm sorry, brothers, I'm your older brother, inshallah, I've been there, done that. I did go through college here. I went through University of Houston. I mean, I've lived in, even though, thank God I wasn't alive, I mean, I wasn't a child when there was internet. I really with that. I don't know how you guys live with the internet. I went through university without internet, so I think I still have some sanity and whatnot. So, but yeah, I mean, I don't know what would happen if we didn't have cell phones. That's how old I am. I can't even imagine a world without cell phones, but I lived in that world without cell phones. There was no cell phones when I went to university. But my point is that, brothers, I'm being brutally honest with you. I'm not trivializing the etiquettes that Islam has come with for sisters and their hijab and their clothing. I'm not making fun of it. But I am saying, brothers, unless she's your blood sister or your wife, it's not your business to get involved with another sister's dress code. Simple as that. Unless she's your biological sister, or your daughter eventually, or your wife, it's not your business to become the Sharia police on campus. Really, it's not. Sisters as well. It's internally, and it's something you have to have a protocol and decide what you want to do in your MSAs and organizations. It's not my business to do, but still, and again, I'm not a progressive sheikh. I'm not like, in the end of the day, there should be some haya and dignity and decency for the Jumu'ah Salah, for example, right? And if a sister comes dressed inappropriately, the brothers should not get involved, but sisters, you should say, hey, we're praying Jumu'ah, and just offer them, wear this. I don't know how you discuss amongst yourselves, I'm saying, right? But there should be a protocol. There should be a sense of, you take charge. For the prayer space I'm talking about, for Salat al-Jumu'ah, something should happen that, hey, you cannot just come and pray like this, sister, we can help you in this regard, but there should be something so that there is a sense that this is our policy here. That having been said, what the policy is, it varies from time to place, and obviously, a sister coming who doesn't know, first time coming, she's cut some slack that somebody who comes 10, 20, 30 times should not be cut. You see the difference here, right? So there should be a sense of, hey, a first timer, she's coming, she might not be a Muslim, she wants to come and study Islam, that's totally different. But hey, if the same sister is coming regularly, and nobody amongst you has taken charge to try to push her forward, don't you see that is also a problem? Right? You see what I'm saying? So there's got to be a middle compromise here. There has to be. I'm not saying clothing is unimportant. I'm saying this is something that comes after the bigger issues have happened. And so, bottom line, brother or sister, don't worry about the faults of other people that much. concentrate on your own faults more. And as you get to know the person of the same gender, slowly but surely, try to have a positive influence in an organic manner. I hope that, inshallah, clarifies the question, inshallah. Oh, mashallah, time's almost up, so let us finish up here. Okay. What is a mainstream movement? Is it in terms of adopting the times and moving away from tradition? Or is it applying tradition to the modern times? As in the sunnah, putting your knee for your wife to go in the camel. What? What is this? As in the sunnah of putting your knee for your wife to get on the camel. Did you guys hear a lecture about this or something? Or? I don't know I know it's referring to Safiya in this regard, but... So let me rephrase the question. What is a mainstream movement? I think I already clarified. A mainstream movement, number one, it has a massive following in the globe. It's not a cult. It is global. Number two, it has historical legacy and scholarships, icons and figures. You can quote books and people and authorities. Number three, it is a movement that does not demonize other Muslims as a priority. Any movement that demonizes other believers in Allah, His Messenger, is a problematic movement. And within all mainstream movements, you will find some ulama that are like that, fanatical, backward thinking, my way or the highway, and some who are working with other movements and groups. Now, as for the level of traditionalism versus modernity and whatnot, I'm sorry, you're going to have to discover on your own. You can't just blindly follow me. You're going to have to discover on your own. And stick with the movement that your heart finds the most comfort in, and realize on the Day of Judgment, as long as you followed your conscience, Allah says in the Quran, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Ask the people of knowledge if you do not know. So, you have to follow people of knowledge. And this will be the final question, then it's 8 o'clock now. So, you have to follow the people of ijtihad. But you have to make an ijtihad to follow the people of ijtihad. What is the ijtihad you're going to make? Sisters, what ijtihad will you make? Be brave. What do you say? You have something to say? No? What ijtihad are you going to make? Reasoning. Scholarly deduction. So ijtihad is to reason from the faith. Ijtihad is to think. So you need to practice ijtihad to give a fatwa. When I give a fatwa, I make ijtihad. I go back to the Quran and Sunnah, extrapolate. Allah says in the Quran, ask the people of knowledge if you do not know. This is the verse in the Quran. So I'm saying the people of knowledge are those who make ijtihad. But you also have to do an ijtihad. Brothers, who to follow? Yes. You have to reason, which scholar am I going to follow? You cannot become a scholar yourself overnight. You want to become a scholar? The doors are open. You're going to have to study 5, 10, 20 years. Go for it. Nobody's stopping you. But don't pretend you can open up the Quran and extract laws immediately. It doesn't work that way. Extract theology immediately. There's a science, a hermeneutics, a tradition, a history, and if you master it, tafaddal, do whatever you want. Until you master it, just like medicine, you can't just open up a textbook on medicine and then pretend you know. You have to go to a doctor, but you have to choose which doctor you're going to, correct? Now, how are you going to choose which doctor you're going to go to? What are going to be the factors of your choice? Are you going to choose a doctor that offers the cheapest discounts? Are you going to choose a doctor that is just walking distance versus a 5-minute drive from you? Is that going to be a factor for you? Your life is in danger and you're worried about coupons from the pharmacy? No, you're going to choose a doctor that you believe is the most qualified, correct? Now, question to all of you, if you're not a doctor. How are you going to know which doctor is the most qualified when you're not a doctor? Experience, what else? Reviews, reputation. What else? Be honest, be realistic. What are you going to look at? Degrees. Where do they study? Who are their teachers? What schools are they coming from? How much years of experience do they have? Their credibility in the doctor community. Correct? Exact same factors. Copy-paste to the world of Islam. What's your pedigree? Where did you study? What are your credentials? What are your authorship? What are your skills? What are your skill sets? Have the rest of the scholarly community accepted you? What are you doing with your life? And all of these will come into play in this regard. Now, be brutally honest here. Still, you will find competing philosophies. And that's where you have to follow your intuition. No problem. And I would say, fi kullin khair, there's good in all of them. Listen, I'm being very blunt here. I don't have a problem with traditionalist movements. I just don't think they're the best suited to allow Islam to flourish. There's a difference between what I'm saying. I don't have a problem. I used to be that. I understand the appeal. I just believe regurgitating the past and copying and pasting from 500 years ago will only get you so far. That's what I'm saying. It's not original thought. You're not solving today's problems. You are ossifying and you are preserving, stalemating. You're copying and pasting something from 500 years ago and you're just putting it into America. And you know what? That's better than nothing. Without a doubt, that's better than nothing. But is it the most conducive for the future? Is it the most conducive for the flourishing of Islamic thought? For the Americanization of Islamic thought? I would say no way. No way. Because traditionalism, and you see this around you, the average American Muslim does not subscribe to a particular traditionalist understanding. Because that's not possible. Yet the average American Muslim ascribes to Islam. Automatically you see this reality, right? So, bottom line, I cannot tell you who to follow, because that's self-serving, that's circular. You can't just follow me to follow and say, I'm following me. No, that doesn't make any sense. But I will tell you, there are mainstream movements. Some of them are literalist, some of them are fundamentalist, some of them are not so mainstream and they're very progressive and considered to be on the more left side of the spectrum, and some of them, like our movement, or the movement that I, like the Fiqh Council of North America, Dr. Zulfikar is on there, I'm on there. The Fiqh Council of North America considers themselves centrist. That having been said, factually speaking, every movement says we're centrist, right? Everybody looks at the world from there. It's like when you're driving on the highway, right? Anybody who's driving faster than you is driving too fast. Anybody driving too slow is driving too slow. You never think, maybe I'm the one going too fast, maybe I'm the one going too slow, right? So from your perspective, you are always centrist. So yes, factually speaking, everybody believes that. Dare I say that? A movement that respects tradition and yet engages with modernity, that is a movement that I personally now am the most comfortable with. And this is what, if you listen to my fatwas or my Q&A or my teachings of Islam, this is where I'm coming from, the paradigm I'm coming from. And there are great giants in our tradition, Shaykh Qadhi, who passed away before him, Rashid Ridha before him, Shatibi. So we have a whole, again, we have a trajectory, all of us have. It's the vision, it's the ideology of Islam being a vibrant faith. Islam being something that is organically adaptable and also does have facts and ethics that are not going to change. So that healthy balance between a tradition that we're taking and inheriting along with engaging with modernity, that is where I personally find the most comfort in. But hey, if you want to follow another tradition, good for you. I have nothing against that. But like I said, follow these three things. Make sure, number one, it is mainstream. Number two, that it has a trajectory of scholarship. And number three, it's not concentrating on nitpicking and on the minutiae and on the fault finding in other Muslims and other traditions. That is a level of fanaticism that will never be conducive to our faith, much less the civilization of Islam. With that, inshallah ta'ala, Dr. Zulfikar, bismillah, you want to make us days. You all know Dr. Zulfikar, he is your imam here. MashaAllah, resident scholar in IAGT, bismillah, fadl. Come on.
Jazakallah khair. Just to supplement what Dr. Yasir said, how many of you know that the teacher of Isaac Newton studied in Istanbul? Do you know it? His name was John Cowell. He was the president or vice chancellor of Isaac Newton's Cambridge University. He lived in Istanbul, studied science, chemistry, and mathematics, and came back and taught Isaac Newton. His other teacher, Isaac Barrow, he studied calculus in Istanbul for 3 years. And actually, Isaac Newton became the head department of mathematics after him. Edward Pocock, the teacher of Robert Boyle and John Locke. He lived 6 years in Aleppo, 3 years in Istanbul, studied Arabic language, translated the books of Tusi, Al-Khwarizmi, Ibn Haytham, and John Wallace, the mashallah founder mathematician in England, learned Arabic at 50 and basically taught his students from there. So please, as the Sheikh said, learn about your legacy, and as he mentioned just ago, Islam and English Enlightenment, the untold story, and I'll give some lectures about it, but inshallah, this is our honor to be part of that ummah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you. Jazakallah khair. And our chairman, the Fiqh Council chairman, is so modern now. If you look at 30 years of Sheikh Yasir, I was scared of him. Now I love him because he is more modern than me.
Jazakallah khair. Jazakumullah khair, guys. Inshallah, till next time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh Yasir and Dr. Zulfikar for taking the time to speak this with us tonight. May Allah reward you guys for your time and effort, I mean. Next I would like to invite Anya real quick, our MSA president, for closing remarks. No? Come. I guess I'll do closing remarks real quick. But Jazakallah khair.